Hello, everyone. We're back. I was a little worried. My internet was down most of the day yesterday for no good reason, not no explicable cause. It was just gone. So I was a little worried that we wouldn't be able to stream today. So, of course, I did what any good gamer does when they don't have access to the internet. Went out with some friends, and went to dinner, and hung out, and played board games, and chilled with people I hadn't seen in person in a while. It was really good. And then I slept in this morning. So, sorry, running a little late. No, you didn't, Bella. I was just saying that I was worried because yesterday my internet had died and was gone most of the day. So I was worried that it wouldn't be around today since there was no good reason for it to be gone. Hey, Gecko! And yeah, so no internet, went out, hung out with friends, then I slept in this morning. And of course, no internet, so I didn't download the new tracks. There we go. Tried to misclick. Plus, Gecko was badgering me before I loaded up the stream. And there she goes again. We were talking about all the crazy heat going on in Canada and how the country was roasting. And I told her that I was a wuss about heat and that I could handle cold way better, but when it got hot, I just sort of like shut down. My brain just didn't want to work right. So she wanted to know when that was. I think she's plotting against me. She's gonna sneak into my house one night and crank the temperature, roast me out as a prank. It's diabolical like that. I don't want the heat. I don't like heat. Sorry, Streamlabs being a little weird. The chat isn't populating very fast. Normally, Streamlabs gets the chat first, and then it displays on the channel because there's a time lag. But right now, that's reversed. So if I'm not answering you in like a timely fashion, it's because the chat's being screwy. But all right, basically anything over 26 degrees, Gecko is just too much for me. I don't even like it at 26, but past that, it's like nope. I'm done. Which is a problem because, you know, it gets more than 26. Yeah, I think it's like barely over 80 Fahrenheit. If it gets above that, I'm just done. See, I told you you'd make fun of me. All right. Off with the headset, though. Definitely need to figure out whether I'm doing AirPods or a different headset or what for going forward. All right, you guys ready for a little more Don Quixote? Get back into it. I didn't do any promo posts or announcements, and I'm 15 minutes late. And So we'll probably have just the two of you here with us today, but that's okay. Little dude listening? What link were you supposed to send me? Anyway. So... Oh, he's playing tanks with a friend. Right on. No, you sent me the Steel Series one, or are you talking about the bone conduction? I think we raid Alex too often. Looking at my recommended channels, like I glanced over, every single channel is a Dead by Daylight channel. That would be good. I would appreciate a link to those so I can check them out. But we were on chapter 11 of Don Quixote. And it's of what befell Don Quixote with the goat herd. I wonder what the goats are. Dragons, perchance? Or a band of ruffians? So each chapter heading has these like woodcut images that have the letter for the first word in them, but some of them are a little hard to make out. They're getting better, but like some of these first couple chapters, I was struggling a little to figure out exactly what the letter was supposed to be. Chapter 11 of what befell Don Quixote with the goat herds. No one could be more kindly received than was Don Quixote by the goat herds, and Sancho, having accommodated Rocinante and his ass in the best manner he was able, pursued the odor emitted by certain pieces of goat's flesh that were boiling in a kettle on a fire. And though he would willingly, at that instant, have tried whether they were ready to be transferred from the kettle to the stomach, he forbore doing so, as the goat herds themselves took them off the fire, and spreading some sheepskins on the ground, very speedily served up their rural mess, and, with much cordiality, invited them both to partake of it. 6 of them, that belonged to the fold, seated themselves round the skins, having first, with rustic compliments, requested Don Quixote to seat himself upon a trough with the bottom upwards, placed on purpose for him. Don Quixote sat down, and Sancho remained standing to serve the cup, which was made of horn. His master, seeing him standing, said to him, "That thou mayest see the intrinsic worth of knight-errantry, and how speedily those who exercise any ministry whatsoever belonging to it may attain honor and estimation in the world, it is my will that thou be seated here by my side, in company with these good people, and become one and the same thing with me, who am thy master and natural lord. That thou eat from off my plate, and drink of the same cup from which I drink. For the same may be said of knight-errantry, which is said of love, that it makes all things equal." Not sure that's in the least bit true. "I give you a great many thanks, sir," said Sancho, "but let me tell your worship that, provided I have victuals enough, I can eat as well or better standing and alone than if I were seated close by an emperor. And farther, to tell you the truth, what I eat in a corner, without compliments and ceremonies, though it were nothing but bread and an onion, relishes better than turkeys at other men's tables. But I am forced to chew leisurely, drink little, wipe my mouth often, and neither sneeze nor cough when I have a mind, nor do other things which may be done when alone and at liberty. So that, good sir, let these honours which your worship is pleased to confer upon me, as a servant and adherent of knight-errantry, being squire to your worship, be exchanged for something of more use and profit to me. For though I place them to account as received in full, I renounce them from this time forward to the end of the world." "Notwithstanding this," said Don Quixote, "thou shalt sit down, for whosoever humbleth himself, God doth exalt." And, pulling him by the arm, he forced him to sit down next to him. The goatherds did not understand this jargon of squires and knight-errants, and therefore only ate, held their peace, and stared at their guests, who, with much satisfaction and appetite, swallowed down pieces as large as their fists. The service of flesh being finished, they spread upon the skins a great quantity of acorns, together with half a cheese, harder than if it had been made of mortar. The horn in the meantime stood not idle, for it went round so often, now full, now empty, like the bucket of a well, that they presently emptied one of the 2 wine-bags that hung in view. After Don Quixote had satisfied his hunger, he took up a handful of acorns, and looking on them attentively, gave utterance to expressions like these. Happy times and happy ages were those which the ancients termed the Golden Age, not because gold, so prized in this our Iron Age, was to be obtained in that fortunate period without toil, but because they who then lived were ignorant of those 2 words, mine and thine. In that blessed age, all things were in common to provide their ordinary sustenance. No other labor was necessary than to raise their hands and take it from the sturdy oaks, which stood liberally inviting them to taste their sweet and relishing fruit. The limpid fountains and running streams offered them, in magnificent abundance, their delicious and transparent waters. In the clefts of rocks and in hollow trees, the industrious and provident bees formed their commonwealths, offering to every hand, without interest, the fertile produce of their most delicious toil. The stately cork trees, impelled by their own courtesy alone, divested themselves of their light and expanded bark, with which men began to cover their houses, supported by rough poles, only as a defense against the inclemency of the heavens. All then was peace, all amity, all concord. The heavy culture of the crooked plough had not yet dared to force open and search into the tender bowels of our first mother, who unconstrained offered from every part of her fertile and spacious bosom whatever might feed, sustain, and delight those, her children, by whom she was then possessed. Then did the simple and beauteous young shepherdesses trip from dale to dale, and from hill to hill, their tresses sometimes plaited, and sometimes loosely flowing, with no more clothing than was necessary modestly to cover what modesty is always required to be concealed. Nor were there ornaments like those now in fashion, to which a value is given by the Tyrian purple and the silk so many ways martyred, but adorned with green dock leaves and ivy interwoven. Perhaps they appeared as splendidly and elegantly decked as our court ladies, with all those rare and foreign inventions which idle curiosity hath taught them. Then there were the amorous conceptions of the soul, clothed in simple and sincere expressions, in the same way and manner they were conceived, without seeking artificial phrases to enhance their value. Nor had fraud, deceit, and malice intermixed with truth and plain dealing. Justice maintained her proper bounds, undisturbed and unassailed by favor and interest, which now so much depreciate, molest, and persecute her. Law was not yet left to the interpretation of the judge, for then there was neither cause nor judge. Maidens in modesty, as I said before, went about alone, without fear of danger from the unbridled freedom and lewd designs of others, and if they were undone, it was entirely owing to their own natural inclination and will. But now, in these detestable ages of ours, no damsel is secure, though she were hidden and enclosed in another labyrinth like that of Crete. For even there, through some cranny, or through the air, by the zeal of cursed importunity, the amorous pestilence finds interest, and there they're wrecked in spite of all seclusion. Therefore, as times became worse, and wickedness increased, to defend maidens, to protect widows, and to relieve orphans and persons distressed, the order of knight-errantry was instituted. Of this order am I, brother goatherds, whom I thank for the good cheer and kind reception ye have given me and my squire. For though by the law of nature everyone living is bound to favor knights-errant, yet, as ye have received and regaled me without being aware of this obligation, it is but reasonable that I should return you my warmest acknowledgments. Hey, little dude, how are you? Glad you could catch the reading. Our knight made this long harangue, which might well have been spared, because the acorns they had put before him reminded him of the golden age, and led him to make that unprofitable discourse to the goatherds. who in astonishment listened to him without saying a word. Sancho also was silent, devouring the acorns and making frequent visits to the second wine bag, which was hanging upon a cork tree in order to keep the wine cool. Don Quixote spent more time in talking than in eating, and supper being over, one of the goatherds said, "That your worship, Señor Knight-errant, may the more truly say that we entertain you with a ready good will, one of our comrades, who will soon be here, shall sing for your pleasure and amusement. He is a very intelligent lad, and deeply enamored. Above all, he can read and write, and play upon the rebeck as well as heart can desire." The goatherd had scarcely said this, when the sound of the rebeck reached their ears, and presently after came the musician, who was a youth of an agreeable mien, about 22 years of age. His comrades asked him if he had supped, and he having answered in the affirmative, one of them said, "If so, Antonio, you may let us have the pleasure of hearing you sing a little, that this gentleman, our guest, may see that even here, among woods and mountains, there are some who are skilled in music. We have told him of your great abilities, and wish you to show them, and prove the truth of what we have said, and therefore I entreat you to sit down and sing the ballad of your love, which your uncle, the curate, composed for you, and which was so well liked in our village." "With all my heart," replied the youth, and without further entreaty he sat down upon the trunk of an old oak, and after tuning his rebeck he began to sing in a most agreeable manner, as follows. "Yes, lovely nymph, thou art my prize. I boast the conquest of thy heart, though nor the tongue nor speaking eyes have yet revealed the latent smart. Thy wit and sense assure my fate, and then my love's success I see, nor can he be unfortunate who dares avow his flame for thee. Yet sometime hast thou frowned, alas, and given my hopes a cruel shock. Then did thy soul seem formed of brass, thy snowy bosom of the rock. But in the midst of thy disdain, thy sharp reproaches and cold delays, hope from behind to ease my pain the border of her robe displays. Ah, lovely maiden, in equal scale, weigh well thy shepherd's truth and love, which ne'er but with his breath can fail, which neither frowns nor smiles can move. If love is shepherds wont to say, be gentleness and courtesy, so courteous is Eulalia, my passion will rewarded be. And if obsequious duty paid, the grateful heart can never move. Mine sure my fair may well persuade a due return and claim thy love. For to seem pleasing in thy sight, I dress myself with studious care, and in my best apparel dight my Sunday clothes on Monday wear. And shepherds say I'm not to blame for cleanly dress and spruce attire, preserve alive love's wanton flame, and gently fan the dying fire. To please my fair in mazy ring, I join the dance and sportive play, and oft beneath thy window sing, when first the cock proclaims the day. With rapture on each charm I dwell, and daily spread thy beauty's fame, and still my tongue thy praise shall tell, though envy swell or malice blame. Teresa of the Baracol, when once I praised you, said in spite, your mistress you an angel call, but a mere ape is your delight. Thanks to the bugle's artful glare, and all the graces counterfeit, thanks to the false and curled hair, which wary love himself might cheat. I swore 'twas false, and said she lied, at that her anger fiercely rose. I boxed the clown that took her side, and how I boxed my fairest nose. I court thee not, Eulalia, to gratify a loose desire. My love is chaste, without alloy of wanton wish or lustful fire. Hey, Cable, welcome. Been a little bit since we saw you. The church hath silken cords that tie consenting hearts in mutual bands. If thou, my fair, its yoke wilt try, thy swain its ready captive stands. If not, by all the saints I swear, on these bleak mountains still to dwell, nor ever quit my toilsome care, but for the cloister and the cell. Here ended the goatherd's song, and Don Quixote requested him to sing something else. But Sancho Panza was of another mind, being more disposed to sleep than to hear ballads. He therefore said to his master, Sir, you had better consider whether you are to rest tonight, for the labor which these honest men undergo all day will not suffer them to pass the night in singing. I understand thee, Sancho, answered Don Quixote, for it is very evident that visits to the wine-bag require to be paid rather with sleep than music. It relished well with us all, blessed be God, answered Sancho. I do not deny it, replied Don Quixote. Lay thyself down where thou wilt, but it is more becoming those of my profession to watch than to sleep. However, it would not be amiss, Sancho, if thou wouldst dress this ear again, for it pains me more than it ought. Sancho did as he was desired, and one of the goatherds, seeing the wound, bade him not be concerned about it, for he would apply such a remedy as should quickly heal it. Then, taking some rosemary leaves which abounded in that place, he chewed them and mixed them with a little salt, and laying them to the ear, bound them on very fast, assuring him that no other salve would be necessary, which indeed proved to be true. Chapter 12. What a certain goatherd related to those who were with Don Quixote. Soon after this there arrived another young lad, laden with provisions from the village. Comrade, said he, do you know what is passing in the village? How should we know? Answered one of them. Know then, continued the youth, that the famous shepherd and scholar, Quixote, died this morning, and it is rumored that it was for love of that devilish girl Marcella, daughter of William the Rich, she who rambles about these woods and fields in the dress of a shepherdess. For Marcella, say you, quoth one. For her, I say, answered the goatherd, and the best of it is, he has ordered in his will that they should bury him in the fields, like a Moor, at the foot of the rock, by the cork tree fountain, which, according to report, and as they say, he himself declared, was the very place where he first saw her. He ordered also other things so extravagant that the clergy say they must not be performed, nor is it fit that they should, for they seem to be heathenish. But his great friend Ambrosio, the student, who accompanied him, dressed also like a shepherd, declares that the whole of what Quixote enjoined shall be executed, and upon this the village is all in an uproar. But, by what I can learn, they will at last do what Ambrosio and all his friends require, and tomorrow they come to inter him with great solemnity in the place I mentioned, and in my opinion it will be a sight well worth seeing. At least I shall not fail to go, although I was certain of not returning tomorrow to the village. We will do the same, answered the goatherds, and let us cast lots who shall stay behind to look after the goats. You say well, Pedro, quoth another, but it will be needless to make use of this expedient, for I will remain for you all, and do not attribute this to self-denial or want of curiosity to me, but to the thorn which struck into my foot the other day, and hinders me from walking. We thank you nevertheless, said Pedro. Don Quixote requested Pedro to give him some account of the deceased man and the shepherdess, to which Pedro answered, that all he knew was that the deceased was a wealthy gentleman, an inhabitant of a village situate among these mountains, who had studied many years at Salamanca, at the end of which time he returned home, with the character of a very learned and well-read person. Particularly, it was said, he understood the science of the stars, and what the sun and moon are doing in the sky, for he told us punctually the eclipse of the sun and moon. Friend, quoth Don Quixote, the obscuration of those two luminaries is called an eclipse, and not eclipse. But Pedro, not regarding niceties, went on with his story, saying, he also foretold when the year would be plentiful, or sterile. Sterile, you would say, friend, quoth Don Quixote. Sterile, sterile, answered Pedro, comes all to the same thing. And as I was saying, his father and friends, who gave credit to his words, became very rich thereby, for they followed his advice in everything. This year, he would say, sow barley and not wheat, and this you may sow vetches and not barley. The next year there will be plenty of oil. The 3 following there will not be a drop. The science they call astrology, said Don Quixote. I know not how it is called, replied Pedro, but I know that he knew all this, and more too. In short, not many months after he came from Salamanca, on a certain day he appeared dressed like a shepherd, with his crook and sheepskin jacket, having thrown aside his scholar's gown, and with an intimate friend of his called Ambrosio, who had been his fellow student, and who now put on likewise the apparel of a shepherd. I forgot to tell you how the deceased Quixote was a great man at making verses, insomuch that he made the carols for Christmas Eve and the religious plays for Corpus Christi, which the boys of the village represented, and everybody said they were most excellent. When the people of the village saw the 2 scholars so suddenly habited like shepherds, they were amazed, and could not get at the cause that induced them to make that strange alteration in their dress. About this time the father of Chrysostom died, and he inherited a large estate in lands and goods, flocks, herds, and money, of all which the youth remained absolute master. And indeed he deserved it all, for he was a very good companion, a charitable man, and a friend to those that were good, and had a face like any blessing. Afterwards it came to be known that he changed his habit for no other purpose, but that he might wander about these desert places after that shepherdess Marcella, with whom, as our lad told you, he was in love. And I will now tell you, for it is fit you should know, who this young slut is, for perhaps, and even without a perhaps, you may have heard the like in all the days of your life, though you were as old as Sarna. Sarah, you mean, replied Don Quixote, not being able to endure the goatherd's mistaking words. Sarna will do, answered Pedro. And, sir, if you must at every turn be correcting my words, we shall not have done with this 12-month. Pardon me, my friend, said Don Quixote, and go on with your story, for I will interrupt you no more. I say then, dear sir of my soul, quoth the goatherd, that in our village there was a farmer still richer than the father of Chrysostom, called William, on whom God bestowed, besides great wealth, a daughter, whose mother, the most respected woman in all our country, died in giving her birth. I think I see her now, with that goodly presence, looking as if she had the sun on one side of her, and the moon on the other, and above all, she was a notable housewife, and a friend to the poor, for which I believe her soul is at this very moment with God in the other world. Her husband William died for grief at the death of so good a wife, leaving his daughter Marcella, young and rich, under the care of an uncle, a priest and the curate of our village. The girl grew up with so much beauty that it put us in mind of her mother, who had a great share, yet it was thought that the daughter would surpass her. And so it fell out, for when she came to be 14 or 15 years of age, nobody beheld her without blessing God for making her so handsome, and most men were in love with and distracted for her. Her uncle kept her both carefully and close. Nevertheless, the fame of her extraordinary beauty so spread itself that, partly for her person, partly for her great riches, her uncle was applied to, solicited, and importuned, not only by those of our own village, but by many others, and those of the better sort too, for several leagues round, to dispose of her in marriage. But he who, to do him justice, is a good Christian, though he was desirous of disposing of her as soon as she was marriageable, yet would not do it without her consent. Not that he had an eye to any advantage he might make of the girl's estate by deferring her marriage, and, in good truth, this has been told in praise of the good priest in more companies than one in our village. For I would have you to know, sir errant, that in these little places everything is talked of, and everything is censored. And take my word for it that a clergyman, especially in country towns, must be over and above good who makes all his parishioners speak well of him. That is true, said Don Quixote. But proceed, for the story is excellent, and you, honest Pedro, tell it with a good grace. May the grace of the Lord never fail me, which is most to the purpose. And you must further know, quoth Pedro, that though the uncle made these proposals known to his niece, and acquainted her with the qualities of each one in particular, of the many that sought her hand, advising her also to marry and choose to her liking, her only answer was that she was not so disposed at present, and that being so young, she did not feel herself able to bear the burden of matrimony. Her uncle, satisfied with these seemingly just excuses, ceased to importune her, and waited till she was grown a little older, when she would know how to choose a companion to her taste. For, said he, and he said well, parents ought not to settle their children against their will. But behold, when we least thought of it, on a certain day the coy Marcella appears as a shepherdess, and without the consent of her uncle, and against the entreaties of all the neighbours, would needs go into the fields with the other country lasses and tend her own flock. And now that she appeared in public, and her beauty was exposed to all beholders, it is impossible to tell you how many wealthy youths, gentlemen, and farmers have taken the shepherd's dress and wander about these plains, making their suit to her. One of whom, as you have already been told, was the deceased, and he, it is said, rather adored than loved her. But think not that, although Marcella has given herself up to this free and unconfined way of life, and with so little, or rather no reserve, she has given the least colour of suspicion to the prejudice of her modesty and discretion. No, Rather, so great and strict is the watch she keeps over her honor, that of all those who serve and solicit her, no one has boasted, or can boast with truth, that she has given him the least hope of obtaining his wishes. For though she does not fly or shun the company and conversation of the shepherds, but treats them in a courteous and friendly manner, yet, when any of them ventures to discover his intention, though it be as just and holy as that of marriage, she casts him from her as out of a stone bow. And by this sort of behavior she does more mischief in this country than if she carried the plague about with her. For her affability and beauty win the hearts of those who converse with her, and incline them to serve and love her. But her disdain and frank dealing drive them to despair, and so they know not what to say to her, and can only exclaim against her, calling her cruel and ungrateful. And sorry, there's a word I can't make out. The book's very, very old, so some of the print is decayed a bit. In other titles, this plainly denote her character. And, were you to abide here, sir, a while, you would hear these mountains and valleys resound with the complaints of those wretched rejects that yet follow her. There's a place not far hence, where about 24 of tall beeches grow, and not one of them is without the name of Marcella written and engraved on its smooth bark. Over some of them is carved a crown, as if the lover would more clearly express that Marcella deserves and wears the crown of all human beauty. Here sighs one shepherd, there complains another. Here are heard amorous sonnets, there despairing ditties. One will pass all the hours of the night seated at the foot of some rock or tree, where, without having closed his weeping eyes, wrapped up and lost in thought, the sun finds him in the morning. Whilst another, giving no truce to his sighs, lies stretched on the burning sand in the midst of the most sultry noonday heat of summer, sending up his complaints to all pitying heaven. In the meantime, the beautiful Marcella, free and unconcerned, triumphs over them all. We who know her wait with impatience to see how this will all end, and who is to be the happy man that shall subdue so intractable a disposition, and enjoy so incomparable a beauty. As all that I have related is certain truth, I can more readily believe what our companion told us concerning the cause of Chrysostom's death, and therefore I advise you, sir, not to fail being tomorrow at his funeral, which will be very well worth seeing to. For Chrysostom had a great many friends, and it is not half a league hence to the place of interment appointed by himself. I will certainly be there, said Don Quixote, and I thank you for the pleasure you have given me by the recital of so entertaining a story. Oh, replied the goatherd, I do not yet know half the adventures of Marcella's lovers, but tomorrow, perhaps, we shall meet by the way with some shepherd who may tell us more. At present it will not be amiss for you to go and sleep under some roof, for the cold dew of the night may do harm to your wound, though the salve I have put to it is such that you need not fear any trouble from it. Sancho Panza, who for his part had wished this long-winded tale of the goatherd at the devil, pressed his master to lay himself down to sleep in Pedro's hut. He did so, and passed the rest of the night thinking of his lady Dulcinea, in imitation of the lovers of Marcella. Sancho took up his lodging between Rocinante and his ass, where he slept, not like a discarded lover, but like a man who had been grievously kicked. Chapter 13. The conclusion of the story of the shepherdess Marcella, with other incidentals. Morning scarcely had dawned through the balconies of the east, when 5 of the 6 goatherds got up and went to awake Don Quixote, whom they asked whether he continued in his resolution of going to see the famous interment of Chrysostom, for if so, they would bear him company. Don Quixote, who desired nothing more, arose and ordered Sancho to saddle. Oops. Sorry, accidentally closed the book. Ordered Sancho to saddle and panel immediately, which he did with great expedition, and with the same dispatch they all set out on their journey. They had not gone a quarter of a league when, upon crossing a pathway, they saw 6 shepherds advancing toward them, clad in jackets of black sheepskin, with garlands of cypress and bitter rosemary on their heads, each of them having in his hand a thick holly club. There came also with them 2 gentlemen on horseback, well equipped for traveling, who were attended by 3 lackeys on foot. When the 2 parties met, they courteously saluted each other, and finding upon inquiry that they were all proceeding to the place of burial, they continued their journey together. One of the horsemen, addressing to his companion, said, "I think, Signor Vivaldo, we shall not repent having stayed to see this famous interment, for without doubt it will be an extraordinary sight, according to the strange accounts those shepherds have given us of the deceased shepherd and murdering shepherdess." "I think so too," answered Vivaldo, "and so far from regretting the delay of one day, I would stay 4 to see it." Don Quixote asked them where they had heard of Marcella and Christum. The travelers said they had met those shepherds early in the morning, and that observing their mournful apparel, they had inquired the cause, and were informed of it by one of them, who told them of the beauty and singularity of a certain shepherdess called Marcella, and the loves of many that wooed her, with the death of Chrysostom, to whose burial they were going. In fine, he related all that Pedro had told Don Quixote. This discord ceased, and another began by Vivaldo asking Don Quixote what might be the reason that induced him to go armed in that manner through a country so peaceable. To which Don Quixote answered, "The profession I follow will not allow or suffer me to go in any other manner. Revels, banquets, and repose were invented for effeminate courtiers, but toil, disquietude, and arms alone were designed for those whom the world calls knights errant, of which number I, though unworthy, am the least." As soon as they heard this, they all perceived his derangement, but in order to discover the nature of his madness, Vivaldo asked him what he meant by knights errant. "Have you not read, sir," answered Don Quixote, "the annals and histories of England, wherein are recorded the famous exploits of King Arthur, whom in our Castilian tongue we perpetually call King Artus, of whom there exists an ancient tradition, universally received over the whole kingdom of Great Britain, that he did not die, but that by magic art he was transformed into a raven, and that in process of time he shall reign again and recover his kingdom and scepter, for which reason it cannot be proved that, from that time to this, any Englishman hath killed a raven. Now, in this good king's time was instituted that renowned order of chivalry, entitled the Knights of the Round Table, and the amours related of Sir Launcelot of the Lake, with the Queen Guinevere, passed exactly as they are recorded, that honourable duenna Quintanilla being their mediatrix and confidant, whence originated that well-known ballad, so much admired here in Spain. Never was knight by ladies so well served as was Sir Launcelot when he came from Britain, with the rest of that sweet and charming account of his amours and exploits. Now, from that time the order of chivalry has been extending and spreading itself through many and diverse parts of the world, and among those of the profession, distinguished and renowned for heroic deeds, was the valiant Amadis de Gaul, with all his sons and grandsons to the 5th generation, the valorous Felix Marte of Hircania, and the never enough to be appraised Tirante the White. Nay, even almost in our own times, we have seen, heard, and conversed with the invincible and valorous knight Don Bellianus of Greece. This gentleman, it is to be a knight errant, and the order of chivalry is what I have described. To this order, as I have said before, I, though a sinner, have devoted myself, and the same which those knights profess do I profess also. Therefore I am travelling through these solitudes and deserts in quest of adventures, with a determined resolution to oppose my arm and my person to the most perilous that fortune may present, in aid of the weak and oppressed." By this discourse the travellers were fully convinced of the disordered state of Don Quixote's mind, and the species of insanity with which they perceived him to be affected struck them with the same surprise that they all felt upon first discovering it. Vivaldo, who was a man of discernment, and withal of a gay disposition, to enliven the remainder of their journey to the funeral mountain, resolved to give him an opportunity of pursuing his extravagant discourse. He therefore said to him, "In my opinion, Sir Knight-errant, you have engaged in one of the most austere professions upon earth, more rigid even than that of the Carthusian monks." "The order of monks may be as rigid," answered Don Quixote, "but that is equally necessary to the world I am much inclined to doubt. For to say the truth, the soldier who executes his captain's orders does no less than the captain himself who gives him the orders. I would say that the religious order, in peace and tranquility, implore heaven for the good of the world. But we soldiers and knights really execute what they pray for, defending it with the strength of our arms and the edge of our swords, not under covert, but in open field, exposed to the intolerable beams of the summer sun and the chilling frosts of winter. Thus, we are God's ministers upon earth, and the arms by which he executes his justice. And, as the affairs of war and those appertaining to it cannot be put in execution without toil, pain, and labor, so they who profess it must unquestionably endure more than those who, in peace and repose, are employed in praying to heaven to assist them, and who can do but little for themselves. I mean not to say, nor do I entertain such a thought, that the state of the knight-errant is as good as that of the religious recluse. Words are hard. Recluse. I would only infer from what I suffer that it is doubtless more laborious, more bastinadoed, more hungry and thirsty, more wretched, more ragged, and more filthy. For there is no doubt but that the knights-errant of old suffered much in the course of their lives. If some of them were raised to empires by the valor of their arms, in good truth they paid dearly for it in blood and sweat. And after all, had they been without the assistance of enchanters and sages, their hopes would have been frustrated, and their wishes unattained. I am of the same opinion, replied the traveller, but one thing among many others which appear to me to be censurable in knights-errant is that when they are prepared to engage in some great and perilous adventure, to the manifest hazard of their lives, at the moment of attack they never think of commending themselves to God, as every Christian is bound to do at such a crisis, but rather commend themselves to their mistresses, and that with as much fervor and devotion as if they were really their God, a thing which to me savors of paganism. Señor, answered Don Quixote, this can by no means be otherwise, and the knight-errant who should act in any other manner would digress much from his duty. For it is a received maxim and custom in chivalry that the knight-errant, who on the point of engaging in some great feat of arms has his lady before him, must turn his eyes fondly and amorously toward her, as if imploring her favor and protection in the hazardous enterprise that awaits him. And even if nobody hear him, he must pronounce some words between his teeth, by which he commends himself to her with his whole heart, and of this we have innumerable examples in history. Nor is it thence to be inferred that they neglect commending themselves to God, for there is time and opportunity enough to do it in the course of the action. Notwithstanding all that, replied the traveller, I have one scruple still remaining, for I have often read that words rising between two knights-errant, and choler beginning to kindle in them both, they turn their horses around, and, taking a large compass about the field, immediately encounter at full speed, and in the midst of their career commend themselves to their mistresses. What commonly happens in the encounter is that one of them tumbles back over his horse's crupper, pierced through and through by his adversary's lance, and if the other had not laid hold of his horse's mane, he must have fallen to the ground. Now, I cannot imagine what leisure the deceased had to commend himself to God in the course of so expeditious a work. Better had it been if the words he spent in commending himself to his lady, in the middle of the career, had been employed as the duties of a Christian require, particularly as I imagine that all knights-errant have not ladies to commend themselves to, because they are not all in love. That cannot be, answered Don Quixote. I say there cannot be a knight-errant without a mistress, for it is as essential and natural to them to be enamored as for the sky to have stars, and most certainly no history exists in which a knight-errant is found without an armor, for from the very circumstances of his being without, he would not be acknowledged as a legitimate knight, but a bastard who had entered the fortress of chivalry, not by the gate, but over the pales like a thief and a robber. Nevertheless, said the traveller, if I am not mistaken, I remember having read that Don Galor, brother to the valorous Amadis de Gaul, never had a particular mistress to whom he might commend himself, notwithstanding which he was no less esteemed and was a very valiant and famous knight. To which our Don Quixote answered, Señor, one swallow makes not a summer. Moreover, I know that Don Galor was in secret very deeply enamored, beside the general love that he entertained toward all whom he thought handsome, a propensity natural to him, and which he was unable to control. But in short, it is well ascertained that there was one whom he had made mistress of his devotion, and to whom he had often commended himself, but very secretly. For upon this quality of secrecy he especially valued himself. If it is essential that every knight-errant be a lover, said the traveller, it may well be presumed that you are yourself one, being of the profession. And if you do not pique yourself upon the same secrecy as Don Galore, I earnestly entreat you, in the name of all this good company, and in my own, to tell us the name, country, quality, and beauty of your mistress, who cannot but account herself happy that in all the world she should know that she is loved and served by so worthy a knight. Here Don Quixote breathed a deep sigh, and said, I cannot positively affirm whether that sweet enemy of mine is pleased or not the world should know I am her servant. I can only say, in answer to what you so very courteously inquire of me, that her name is Dulcinea, her country Toboso, a town of La Mancha, her quality at least that of a princess, since she is my queen and sovereign lady, her beauty more than human, since in her all the impossible and chimerical attributes of beauty which the poets ascribe to their mistresses are realized. For her hair is gold, her forehead the Elysian fields, her eyebrows rainbows, her eyes suns, her cheeks roses, and her lips coral, her teeth pearls, her neck alabaster, her bosom marble, and her hands ivory, her whiteness snow, and her whole person without parallel. We would fain know, replied Vivaldo, her lineage, race, and family. To which Don Quixote answered, She is not of the ancient Roman Curtii, Cae, or the Scipios, nor the modern Colonnas or Orsini's, nor the Moncadas and the Rocases of Catalonia, neither is she of the Rebellas and Villanovas of Valentia, the Palafoxes, Nuzas, Rocabertes, Corellias, Lunas, Algones, Urias, Fozes and Gurias of Aragon, the Cerdas, Manriques, Mendozas, and Guzmans of Castile, the Alencastros, Pius, and Meneses of Portugal, but she is of those of Toboso de la Mancha, a lineage, though modern, is yet such as may give a noble beginning to the most illustrious families of future ages. And in this let no one contradict me, unless it be on the conditions that Zerbino fixed under the arms of Orlando, where it said, That night alone these arms shall move, who dares Orlando's prowess prove. Although mine be that of the Cachapines of Laredo, replied the traveller, I dare not compare it with that of Toboso de la Mancha, though to say the truth, no such appellation hath till now ever reached my ears. Is it possible you should never have heard of it? Exclaimed Don Quixote. All the party had listened with great attention to this dialogue, and even the goatherds and shepherds perceived the excessive distraction of our knight. Sancho Panza alone believed all that his master said to be true, knowing who he was and having been acquainted with him from childhood. But he had some doubts as to that part which concerned the fair Dulcinea del Toboso, never having heard of such a name or such a princess, though he lived so near Toboso. Thus conversing, they proceeded on, when they discerned through a cleft between two high mountains about 20 shepherds coming down, all clad in jerkins of black wool and crowned with garlands, some of which, as appeared afterwards, were of yew and some of cypress. 6 of them carried a bier covered with various flowers and boughs, upon which one of the goatherds said, Those who come yonder are bearing the corpse of Quixote, and at the foot of yonder mountains is the place where he is desired to be interred. They made haste, therefore, to reach them, which they did just as the bier was set down on the ground, and 4 of them, with sharp pickaxes, were making the grave by the side of a hard rock. After mutual salutations, Don Quixote and his company went to take a view of the bier, upon which they saw a dead body, strewed with flowers, in the dress of a shepherd, apparently about 30 years of age, and though dead, it was evident that his countenance had been beautiful and his figure elegant. Several books and a great number of papers, some open and some folded, lay round him on the bier. All that were present, spectators as well as those who were opening the grave, kept a marvelous silence, until one of those who had borne the deceased said to another, Observe carefully, Ambrosio, whether this be the place which Chrysostom mentioned, since you wish it for it to be so exact in executing his will. It is here, answered Ambrosio, for in this very place my unhappy friend often told me of his woe. Here it was, he told me, that he first beheld that mortal enemy of the human race. Here it was that he declared to her his no less honorable than ardent passion. Here it was that Marcella finally undeceived and treated him with such disdain that she put an end to the tragedy of his miserable life. And here, in memory of so many misfortunes, he desired to be deposited in the bowels of eternal oblivion. Then addressing himself to Don Quixote and the travelers, he thus continued, This body, sirs, which you are regarding with compassionate eyes, was the receptacle of a soul upon which heaven had bestowed an infinite portion of its treasures. This is the body of Chrysostom, who was a man of rare genius, matchless courtesy, and unbounded kindness. He was a phoenix in friendship, magnificent without ostentation, grave without arrogance, cheerful without meanness. In short, the first in all that was good, and second to none in all that was unfortunate. He loved and was abhorred. He adored and was scorned. He courted a savage. He solicited a statue. He pursued the wind. He called aloud to the desert. He was the slave of ingratitude, whose recompense was to leave him in the middle of his career of life, a prey to death, inflicted by a certain shepherdess, whom he endeavored to render immortal in the memories of men, as these papers you are looking at would sufficiently demonstrate, had he not ordered me to commit them to the flames at the same time that his body was deposited in the earth. You would then be more rigorous and cruel to them, said Vivaldo, than their master himself, for it is neither just nor wise to fulfill the will of him who commands what is utterly unreasonable. Augustus Caesar deemed it wrong to consent to the execution of what the divine Mantuan commanded in his will. Therefore, Signor Ambrosio, although you commit your friend's body to the earth, do not commit his writings also to oblivion. And if he is ordained like a man aggrieved, do not you fulfill like one without discretion, but rather preserve these papers, in order that the cruelty of Marcella may be still remembered, and serve for an example to those who shall live in times to come, that they may avoid falling down the like precipices. For I am acquainted, as well as my companions here, with the story of this your enamored and despairing friend. We know also your friendship and the occasion of his death, and what he ordered on his deathbed, from which lamentable history we may conclude how great has been the cruelty of Marcella, the love of Chrysostom, and the sincerity of your friendship, and also learn the end of those who run headlong in the path that delirious passion presents to their view. Last night we heard of Chrysostom's death, and that he was to be interred in this place. Led, therefore, by curiosity and compassion, we turned out of our way, and determined to behold with our eyes what had interested us so much in the recital. And in return for our pity and our desire to give aid, had it been possible, we beseech you, O wise Ambrosio, at least request it on my own behalf, that you will not burn the papers, but allow me to take some of them. Then, without waiting for the shepherd's reply, he stretched out his hand and took some of those that were nearest to him, upon which Ambrosio said, Out of civility, signor, I will consent to your keeping those you have taken, but if you expect that I shall forbear burning those that remain, you are deceived. Vivaldo, desirous of seeing what the papers contained, immediately opened one of them, and found that it was entitled The Song of Despair. Ambrosio, hearing it, said, This is the last thing which the unhappy man wrote, and that all present may conceive, signor, to what a state of misery he was reduced. Read it aloud, for you will have time enough while they are digging the grave. That I will do with all my heart, said Vivaldo. And, as all the bystanders had the same desire, they assembled around him, and he read in an audible voice as follows. And cliffhanger. That's where we're going to leave off for today. We'll pick up with chapter 14 and Chrysostom's Song of Despair. Probably Sunday for those of you in the west coast of North America because I don't think I'm going to be able to stream tomorrow. So I'll do a makeup one for the Sunday stream. No! Why no? Because I'm leaving off right before the song. Don't be sad, Vela. You can hear me on Sunday. I'll read more of it then, I promise. Oh, but surely you have a phone, right? Or at least there's the VOD. Oh. Let's go raid Russell. Puns and art. Geeky art. Put the headset on so I can actually hear him when we jump into his channel. Let's see. He's doing a painting from Red Dead. So let's go say hi to him. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining. I hope you're enjoying Don Quixote and the reading. And we'll see you again Sunday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. And then again on Wednesday at So let's go raid Russell. 2 L's _ Hey Gecko, I kind of figured you'd fall asleep as much as you said you'd been working. Alright, let's see if I typed that right. What? Wants me to sign in to Twitch again. It's weird. Alright, hang on a moment while I get signed in. Alright, there we go. Alright guys, we're going to go jump in on an art stream of video game characters. And away we go.